Hello and welcome to the Airbnb Superhost podcast. Have you ever been offered some form of treat by a stranger and the situation's been so awkward that you declined? Or worse still, were convinced that the other person had a hidden agenda? Well, today I'm talking about the delicate art of avoiding kindness creating confusion. In other words, how do we stop our guests from feeling awkward on occasions when we're simply trying to be generous? Maybe to enhance their experience or just being kind in the moment. My name is Neil Harvey, your personal superhost, and my goal is to share all things Airbnb that have enabled me to quit the job and live just off the income from hosting from my own home. Now, I often enjoy offering a guest a small treat, glass of wine, ride to the station, little something for the barbecue. But the blurred line between generosity and business can be a minefield if not handled with clarity and grace. Now, I remember something that has stuck with me right from my student days back in the early 1980s, when a fellow student shared a story that has haunted me ever since, actually. She'd met someone who invited her and a few others to join in for dinner at a very fancy hotel. There he was, she said, ordering lobster, steaks, the best wines, and I was just sitting there thinking, I can't afford this. I don't have any money. How's this going to work? Are we going to divide the bill equally, or do I need to pay for just what I've eaten? And at the end of the meal, she nervously asked, how much do I owe you for the evening? To which the host replied, nothing, my dear. I'm the catering manager here. It's all on the house. And although that might sound a lovely gesture that he did, she felt deeply embarrassed, and she told me that the evening wasn't pleasurable at all. In fact, it was stressful from start to finish. The lack of clarity had her worried sick, wondering, how am I going to pay? And worse, as the bill got bigger and bigger, she started to wonder if payment might be expected in other ways. So, she said, finishing her story, far from becoming a lovely treat, it almost became a nightmare. What a shame. If only the host had explained at the start that this was his treat because he was a senior employee there, and the whole evening could have been a joyful, relaxed experience. But that story taught me something powerful. When you want to treat someone, make it clear from the outset that this is the case by saying something like, it's my treat, or it's on the house. And there are so many little moments where, as a host, these opportunities arise. Sometimes I'll open a bottle of wine for dinner and offer a glass to a guest. Sometimes someone arrives from the airport late at night, tired and hungry, and I'll offer them scrambled egg on toast rather than have them venture out into the darkness at midnight. No, go and find yourself something to eat. There's a supermarket a quarter of a mile away from here. Or I'll see a guest that's got 2 or 3 suitcases and I'll run them to the station. It's only a mile, but it makes a huge difference for them. But if I'm not careful, the recipient may end up feeling embarrassed because they feel they need to pay, or worried they're putting me out, or in rare cases, like my student friend, wondering what hidden expectations might lie behind my generosity. Remember, host and guest are together because of a business transaction. The guest wants a service, bed for the night, and the host wants payment for that service given. So when something extra is offered, like a lift or a meal, of course a guest might assume it's the added service with an added cost. That's why it's so important that when we offer something kind, we immediately make the boundaries clear by saying something with a smile like, this is on me, no charge, just part of the welcome. Actually, when a guest pushes back after I have made it clear that the treat is on me, I quite often say, this isn't all about you. I have to enjoy myself too, and having you join me for whatever it is, will tick that box. And that usually gets a laugh and a graceful acceptance. They know where they stand, they can relax and enjoy the moment. And that's exactly what we want as hosts, for generosity to feel like a gift, not to create a question mark. Now, as I've said many a time, when the boundaries are clear, everyone gets along better, because there's no doubt, and with no doubt there's no confusion. Let me share a few moments where I've had to be very tactful with my generosity during my own hosting journey. I sometimes throw what I call a house barbecue. And I do this when I notice that a group of random guests are going to be staying together for a week or so. And it's a great way to create a sense of community among the strangers. And the dynamics in the house are always amazing after I do this. I'll jump onto Canva, knock up a quick invitation and send it via WhatsApp or print it out to everyone and give it to everyone in the house. And crucially, the invite always says something like, I'll barbecue the chicken, all guests bring a contribution to add to the meal. That little line does all the work, because now it's not me hosting them, it's us sharing a meal together. Nobody feels awkward, everybody's contributing. In fact, they don't feel like dinner guests. They feel a bit like co-hosts. They bring food to share with others and suddenly we've created something together. And that sense of shared ownership completely changes the dynamics of the meal. You know, another time I had a guest who absolutely refused to accept my offer of a lift to the station as a gift. She insisted on paying me the equivalent of a taxi fare. But the moment money enters the exchange, something shifts. It takes away from the generosity and it turns it into a transaction. And that's not what I wanted the gesture to be. So I offered a compromise. I said, all right then, buy me a bottle of wine. That would be lovely. She agreed, and she did. And here's why that worked. Now she could decide what she wanted to spend. I'd never know what the value was, and a commercial transaction was changed to become an exchange of kindness. It became a transaction of gifts, not a transaction of money. And we both walked away smiling. My mum used to say, you know, accept gifts graciously. And it's such good advice, because when you receive someone else's generosity without batting it away or turning it into a trade, you're honouring their intention. You're saying, I see what you're trying to give and I value it. Thank you. And that point was really hammered home to me, again back in my university days. I was throwing a party and a fellow student offered to help out by manning the barbecue. I was grateful, and without thinking I said, oh, that'll be lovely, I'll pay you £5 an hour. Which I should add was quite a bit of money back then. Well, she went ballistic. She said, I want to help you make your party a success. I'm not doing it for payment, so don't even go there. Why does everything have to be done for money? Can't I just do it because I want to? If you really want to thank me, buy me a box of chocolates, but don't make this a financial transaction. Well, her outburst has really stuck with me. The fact that I'm still remembering it about 45 years later. I still feel slightly embarrassed about it. Probably proves her point. Now, all these little stories show the same thing. When we're not clear, or when we accidentally attach money to what was meant to be a gift, we risk changing the emotional meaning of that gesture. And more importantly, it can make someone feel awkward, guilty, or even offended, which is the opposite of what we intended when we were just trying to be kind. So as hosts, we need to understand that generosity expresses kindness, but clarity is essential too. Now let's look at some practical ways to get that balance right. So your guest always knows where they stand and you can both walk away feeling good. So here are some of my golden rules for generosity without confusion. Things I've learnt from years of spontaneous kindness and a few near misses along the way. Now, personally, I love being spontaneous with small acts of generosity. Often the moment arises and it has a tiny window of time where your action can actually make a difference. Let me tell you about something that happened a few weeks ago. A guest arrived in a really bad mental state. He was going through a messy divorce. She's even taken the dog. She's taken everything, he said. He was alcohol dependent and had just turned down a job in his specialist field because he recognised, frankly, he wasn't fit enough to work. Now, in his first 24 hours, he just slept. He didn't eat, he barely spoke, he was physically sick, he was a wreck. Now, let me stress, this is not a typical guest profile, but once in a blue moon, maybe once every 3 or 4 years, someone like this turns up. And they just need a bit of TLC, tender loving care, even if they don't ask for it. On the second day, he walked through the kitchen just as I was preparing my own lunch. Ah, Stuart, good to see you. Can I offer you a bite to eat? My treat. Oh, no, mate, I can't eat, but thank you. I chose not to hear his no as final. He needed to eat something. It's just something light, chicken soup, good for the soul. Come and join me. I've made too much anyway. He hesitated, so I just needed to close the sale. Hey, grab a bowl. I'll only give you a small portion. He smiled. Okay, like a small slice of toast with that? Yeah, go on then. He sat down and we ate together. And when he'd finished, he looked up at me and he said, "Oh, thanks, mate. I feel so much better for having eaten that. That's so kind of you." "Well," I said, "someone's got to look after you, so it might as well be me." And he left 7 days later in a far, far better state than when he had arrived. But let's break down what happened there and why it worked. Here are a few of the tactics that I used that helped turn his awkwardness to my invitation into a comfortable acceptance. My first offer included the words, "my treat," and that set the tone immediately. There's no payment expected, and I saw him as someone worthy of my attention, which boosted his self-esteem. Secondly, salespeople say no often means I need more information. So when Stuart declined, I added that it was a light meal, that I'd made too much, and that I'd only give him a small portion anyway, all of which made it easier for him to accept. And when he hesitated, I seized the moment to give him something to do, which helped him to commit. I said, "Grab a bowl." And by offering him just one small slice of toast, I made the whole proposition feel manageable and nothing overwhelming. Fourthly, by the time he'd eaten, I could say, "Someone's got to look after you," because I already had. And that unlocked the emotional door for him to accept more help later in his stay. Now that last story might be more intense than most, but the principles are universal. And they apply whether you're dealing with emotional breakdowns or just offering someone a cup of tea. So let's pull things back to a few everyday examples that hopefully any host can relate to. A lot of potential awkwardness can be avoided before the guest even arrives, simply by being specific with your pre-arrival communication. I mean, take the dome at the bottom of my garden. I often get requests to prep it for a special surprise for the booker's partner, a bottle of bubbly, some balloons, a few snacks. And my reply is always the same. Here's what I can offer, here's what it costs, and by the way, anything I buy at the supermarket is marked up by 10% to cover my time. It's simple, transparent, no surprises, no awkwardness. They can accept yes or no. And there should always be room for a no. I mean, when a guest arrives, I often offer a cup of tea. Most people say yes. But now and again, someone will decline, and that's fine. I don't push. You never know what's going on in their life. Maybe they had a tedious journey. Maybe they've had a stressful day at work, or maybe they just don't like drinking tea. That's okay. Maybe they said no because some guests simply can't accept anything without giving something back. Like the woman who insisted on paying for her lift to the station. And in that case, rather than argue, my suggestion to buy me a bottle of wine gave her a way to reciprocate, without turning my actions into a financial exchange. But ultimately, there's no universal script for generosity. You've just got to use your intuition to know what to offer, when to offer it, and how to frame it so it lands as kindness without confusion or seeming like a sneaky upsell. So here's my superhost secret for this episode. Find one thing that you love doing for guests and work out how can you make it land the way you intend it to. I've shared a few of mine. It doesn't have to be anything grand. Maybe it's just being a good listener, being a quiet encourager, leaving a handwritten card to welcome your guests when you're not there, or to congratulate them on an achievement that they've done whilst they're with you. You never know how your actions might positively affect someone. And just to reiterate that point, here is a limerick about the superhost secret. Kindness, I learnt from my mom, can brighten the path someone's on. A small, thoughtful deed can plant a small seed that blossoms long after you're gone. And I remember sitting at my mother's funeral thinking, is this it? Just 2 sides of A4 with a eulogy on it and a bank balance? But actually, it's what's written on that paper that really matters. That's your legacy. There are typically 2 dates on every gravestone, the date of birth and the date of death. But the important part, the part that truly counts, is what happens along the dash in between. And maybe, just maybe, that dash is best filled with thoughtful acts of kindness, no matter how small. You never know what it might trigger. Some people call it the butterfly effect. I just call it random acts of kindness. When you're hosting people who have to stay away from their loved ones because of their work commitments, I think these gestures matter more than we'll ever know. Well, that's it for this recording. If you know anyone who might be thinking about earning some money through hosting, then please do share this podcast series with them. Follow me on Instagram, etc. at superhostneil for more tips, tricks and a bit of laughter. Until next time, may your rooms be booked, your reviews 5-star, and you find a way to add value to your guests gracefully.